G'day photographers, hope you are well. It's Ben from TAFE and I want to start a little video series here. It's based off the questions you guys ask. Okay, so first up, the studio behind me is a schmozzle, and that is good because it means things are happening in here. We've got a couple of exciting developments coming. We've got some new lights. Yes. I think there's some new floor coming in here too. Yes. And we're getting some really nice paint put in. So, yes. But that's not the subject of this video. The subject is a question, and I'm going to get to that question right now. Also, I'm going to keep this first question just anonymous. It's just from a photographer at Wodonga TAFE. Maybe later on, when we all get cool with this process, we might start dropping in first names just to get a feel for everyone out there in the Diploma verse. That's universe and diploma. I did that. All right, so the question I've got, and I'm going to read it. It is, hi Ben, hey, quick question. What is the best way to get a single image to someone who wants to buy one? Email has a file size limit. Not sure what that limit is, but a raw file would be too large, I think. And I'm unsure if email compresses at all, therefore affecting the image quality. I have a Dropbox account and I have just emailed a link to a folder in the past. Is this the best way? It just seems time consuming to do this over and over for a single image. Maybe this wasn't such a quick question after all. Thank you for the question. First up, when we're sending by email, for me, what works best is using the send file attachment option. It might be a little paperclip and not that add photos attach part. I never touch that because when I do, it sort of embeds the photos into the text. It's really hard to get the photos out. It does compress them and make the size just nyeh. So I always just treat my photos just like they're a Word document or a PDF or just something else you'd email, and I just go file, attach, blam it in there, send it off. The file size thing I found these days to be much better than it used to be. So if you're just sending off a photo, generally it'll go straight away. It's only when you start to add 2 or 3 photos you start to hit that file limit. Most of the time I don't have that issue now, particularly if I'm emailing a single photo, and particularly if that photo is a high resolution JPEG. Obviously, if you're going to send like a giant PSD file or a TIFF file, or a RAW file, although we'll get into RAWs a bit later, they're going to be massive files, and that's when you're probably going to get to file size trouble. Ultimately, the best format to send to your client is the format they ask for. If you're dealing with a graphic designer or another photographer or a newspaper, magazine, any of those sorts of things, they usually have a few requirements. It needs to be this many DPI, it needs to be this much color, it needs to be this color space. So if your client knows what they want, send them what they want. And it's totally fine for you as just part of professional discourse and chatting with each other to ask. No one's going to think you're a dodgy photographer if you ask that. That said, a lot of your clients, they don't know what they want. They know that they just want some photos because they want to take them to their camera store and get them printed and make their lounge room look beautiful. If you're in the business of shooting, editing, and then delivering files, this sort of information is going to be hopefully helpful. If you've got yourself a business model working where you handle the printing and you just give them prints, you've probably already got this stuff nailed and in the can anyway. Sending a file, a high resolution JPEG file suits, like 90%, if not all, like 100% of just about any client's needs these days. Most people are very happy with that. Couple of reasons. One, if it's got a computer in it, it can read a JPEG. Files like PSDs, TIFFs, sometimes they need more sophisticated software to open them, and that's not available to most clients. Okay, you've heard me say high resolution JPEG about 5 times now, and you're probably thinking, Ben, what the heck is a high resolution JPEG? It's going to change depending on your camera. If you've got like a 50 megapixel monster, high resolution JPEG is going to be a totally different size to my, middle of the road 16 megapixel Olympus camera, which this is filming on, which is again going to be much bigger to the highest resolution JPEG that came out of the top of the line Canon 1DN Mark II, which came out, 10 years ago. Don't get caught up on a megapixel size. The truth is, if you've got a good graphic designer or a good printer, they can work magic with just about any file over about 5 megapixels. 10 years ago, cameras, like the top end cameras, had about 8 megapixel sensors. Everyone was still billboard advertising, big canvases, they were still a thing. They were still getting them done. So don't get caught up in this megapixel race. I'm going to jump into Photoshop to show you what I consider a high resolution JPEG to be. This file's come out of an Olympus camera. It's had some treatment to it in Photoshop. It's had a slight crop. There's many different ways to save things in Photoshop and Lightroom and any other program, but for argument's sake, I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Save As, I'm going to call my file something, I'm going to save it as a JPEG, I'm going to hit Save, sure, I'm going to replace it. This here is where I do most of my high resolution work, okay? So, small file, large file, okay? I drag the slider all the way to the right, the quality's on 12. That's going to give me an estimated file size of about 7 meg. It's probably going to be a bit bigger, and I hit save. Okay, some people might cringe at that, some people might say, oh my God, but that's the fact of the matter. That's how I delivered every photo into every newspaper I ever worked at. If I do a family portrait shoot or anything like that, that's how I save the photos out. I've never had a complaint, okay? Like I said, if a client knows how they want it, definitely deliver it that way. If they don't, that's gonna, in my experience, suit just about everyone. Just to show you a different lingo, this is CaptureOne, it's not an Adobe program. If I wanted to export or save as different sort of lingo, one file, or I could shift click on 3 and select 3. When I go to export, I want to export the variants, the ones with the edits. JPEG, this slider is still here, but it's a little bit different. So it's got 100 all the way down to 0. So it's basically a percentage thing. So a full quality, 100% quality, highest quality JPEG, there's some of the terms you might hear around. That's basically what I mean. You go in there, you get the slider, you make your file as big as possible, you hit export, you're good to go. Cool. Now, if you had multiple files, I would send them, over a Google Drive or a Dropbox, something where you can upload either a folder or a zipped together file group of images that'll generate a download link which you can send to someone or your client, and then they can download the photos themselves. I really wouldn't mess around with splitting up your 12 photos into 5 emails and then sending them to your client. It's messy and time consuming for you, the photographer, and for the client who's then got to open them and download them and then sort it out. Life's short, just give them a download link, tell them to click on the link and save the file. All right, I'm saving the first bit of the question for last here because I just want to talk about it for a bit. And that was the suggestion that sending a raw file to a client might be a good idea. Sometimes it is. Sometimes if it's an editorial sort of assignment, you just have to. It's just par for the course of doing business. I think though for the majority of photo clients, I think they want to see the raw file because they're caught up in that hype that raw is better instead of the more correct raw is more potential but more work. If you can avoid it without upsetting anyone, I think you should try and not send the raw file. Here's why. A raw file is straight out of the camera. So to me, it's unfinished. It's not done. It's a bit like going to a restaurant and having the raw chicken brought out with an egg in its shell and a bag of breadcrumbs, and the chef there with his fancy hat on going, enjoy your deconstructed schnitzel. I am big about shooting, editing, finishing, delivering. That for me works really well, and hopefully, and hasn't resulted in too many, really not any unhappy clients, and I think that'll work well for you guys too. That said, when you're working in things like CaptureOne or Bridge or Lightroom and you make changes to a raw file, the user experience really does feel like you are altering that file. You're not really. When I teach this, I say it's like making those changes is like making a script for your glasses. So it's a set of instructions, but it's made into a prescription that makes these lenses, and then you're seeing through those lenses or filters and looking on the raw file. So you're seeing the changes and they're sitting on top of the raw file. All right, I'm going to demonstrate that because as eloquent as I was, I feel I could just show it better. This is an Olympus raw file. I know that because it says .orf, Olympus raw file. It's a black and white photo, and as we know, a camera doesn't shoot raw black and white images. It shoots all the data. I'm in CaptureOne. I've made changes. You can see that. I've messed with saturation and pulled things around and worked on sliders and enabled the black and white and all that kind of stuff. So I've affected this raw image. Or have I? If we double click, right click on this photo, this image, and we go to show in Finder. Oh, hello. What have we here? We have a raw file that matches the file name, so I know it's the same file, but even at a thumbnail level, I can see that it's not black and white. So if I'll hit spacebar and bring it up big, and it's going to take a minute to render into, there we go, now it's sharp. That's the file straight out of camera, okay? That's the raw file. It doesn't have any changes sitting on top of it. So if you were to send the client the raw file, this is what you would be sending them, okay? Now there's complicated processes you can send, if I've got CaptureOne and you've got CaptureOne, I can send this raw file plus the packet of information, so we can do it that way. But if you just send a raw file to a client, they're going to get the unfinished, unedited, unintended photo. And I'd really encourage you to, when you have the flexibility, to not do that. Alright photographers, thank you for sticking with me for this first video. I hope I will get better at delivering them. Keep the questions coming in. This is by no means a way to me saying stop the questions, stop the interaction. That's not what the Diploma of Photo Imaging is about at Wodonga TAFE. It's all about the back and forth wherever you are around Australia. It's a really great community. Keep the questions coming in via email, via phone, Facebook message, or just drop them straight into the Facebook group. That's a really nice environment, and you can often get really diverse answers to your questions, not just from Tracy or I, but from past graduates who are sticking around, and for other students who are in exactly the same boat as you are, all working really hard to get your certificate.